Welcome to CBC Weekly Talk. My name is Anastasia Lavrina. The significance of the South Caucasus is rapidly increasing on a global scale. The role of the major players in the region, Azerbaijan and Georgia, is also growing. Particularly close engagement is visible in the successful realization of a number of large-scale transportation communication projects that serves as a bridge between Europe and Asia. But what are the perspectives for the Trilateral Cooperation format in South Caucasus between Baku, Tbilisi and Yerevan, which has been so far rejected by Armenia? All details in our program today. My guest now is Viktor Kipiani, as a chair of a Georgian think tank organization, GeoCase. Hello and welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome to Baku as well. As far as I know, you are taking part in the conference Security Strategic Network Connecting Central Asia, Caucasus and Beyond.
Correct.
Security and strategy. Please tell us the meaning of these words when it comes to the network connections among the mentioned regions.
Yes, I think it's a good start of our conversation, especially in these times when we're witnessing the times of polycrisis, because so many crises and different types of crises are happening around us. The war in Ukraine, the post-pandemics, aftershocks, redesign of global supply chains, and many, many others. And therefore, in this reality, we have to strategize a bit more in a more unconventional way than we've been doing before. But I think that we have to pick up on the definition of security. And that is really a good kickoff of our conversation. These days, security is a much broader definition than just a hard power. It means much more in these times, especially in consideration of those various types of crises which we have mentioned. It's about resilience, it's about robustness, it's about sustainability, and it's about economic purpose and usefulness. And I think that's what we are discussing these days, and we will continue discussing these days, about aligning the region around very specific objectives and bringing together those interests which could create, that sustainability. In a more fashionable way, it's called these days interconnectedness, interdependency. As we're saying, it's a timely task, it's a timely challenge, but still it's quite a unique challenge, a headache, because if you take the broader region, many countries with various governance structures, political regimes, traditions. But as I'm saying, these days it's about realigning interests. The world is bidding a farewell to the old times when there was a dichotomy of democracy versus autocracy. So I think that this conference in particular and this gathering would once again try to emphasize what brings us together, what unites us, and what could lay down the foundations of a bigger cooperation. And when I'm saying that the last point to your question, when we're saying building up a much bigger construction of more broader cooperation, we already have a good history of our bilateral ties, Azerbaijan and Georgia, and those strong foundations being laid in the 90s of the last century. So we have a legacy, we have strong premises. So frankly speaking, we don't have to start from the scratch. We just have to widespread, that good legacy and good tradition, involving as more nations as we could.
Indeed, and you mentioned very nice background of cooperation between Georgia and Azerbaijan, and we'll definitely come back to this point, especially energy. I guess this is a particular question we will also discuss. But trilateral cooperation between Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia will definitely benefit the future development of the South Caucasus. And I'm more than sure that many European countries, the United States of America, the Central Asian states are willing to see the fruitful cooperation establishment between three South Caucasus states. But for now, we have only bilateral cooperation between Georgia and Azerbaijan. What are the perspectives for the trilateral cooperation in the near future?
We're enjoying the bilateral bonds between Georgia and Azerbaijan, but we don't have to forget that Georgia has an extra asset of having bilateral good bonds with Armenia. what we all have to agree on, that for once and ever, the region of the South Caucasus should get rid of the toxic connotations, because let us admit that still the understanding, perception or misperception of the South Caucasus relates to civil wars, strifes, conflicts, various types of crises. So I think, that understanding could provide us with a good basis for looking into the future with a sober mind and a healthy mindset as well. So, and we should also not to forget that when we speak about the values-based foundations of those cooperation, we have to keep in mind very basic principles of international law as well, which is sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of your sovereignty. So these are those premises, those principles we all have to agree on. The next point, which I would touch on very softly with your permission, as our audience knows and appreciates, Georgia kept a sort of balancing act when the war has started in Nagorno-Karabakh. This is well understood because we keep to try open relations with both Armenia and Azerbaijan. Besides, we have our own nationals, Georgian nationals of Azeri origin and Armenian origin, so therefore the policies of the Georgian government was to avoid any conflict or any clash between them. So I think that at this point at this juncture of history, Yerevan has a unique opportunity to reconstruct its policy, which probably was holding back its development, its integration into regional development and projects, bring itself into the orbits of those projects. And I think that, as I've said, the reconsideration of the principles which we've mentioned and of the pluses or upsides of that unity could hopefully bring Yerevan into the same orbit of the cooperation which Tbilisi and Baku are enjoying. My strong belief, and I'm pretty sure I'm not an exception to the rule, that the unity of the South Caucasus, which would be as complete as possible with inclusion of Yerevan and with inclusion of Armenia, would make the region more competitive, more resilient, and more advantageous in terms of getting those benefits, geopolitical or business dividends, which are so much, I would not be saying, scarce in the world, but there is a long queue of different regions. And therefore we all should be mindful that nothing is granted and nothing could be accomplished or achieved just at your sole expense or at your own. So more we're united, more we're brought in line with our common objectives, better we are off, stronger we are, and more competitive.
How do you see the role of Georgia in the future reconciliation between Armenia and Azerbaijan? Just recently, Prime Minister of Georgia mentioned that Georgia is ready to act as a mediator between two countries if needed.
We made the same statement when the war has started.
Right.
We proposed Tbilisi as the venue, or possible venue, for mediating or negotiating. Exactly because of the fact that we keep those channels of communication, politically, diplomatically, business-wise, culture-wise as well, open. I think that this still keeps us in that unique position. So if there is a need, definitely all we could do just to propose, we cannot insist. So if there is a will by official Baku and by official Yerevan, I think Tbilisi would be most ready and under the historically moral obligation as well to bring those two sides to the table, We're already negotiating, by the way, and of course, we're mindful of the fact that there are quite intense track of diplomacy these days, and we are all anticipating or expecting, some fundamental breakthrough by the fall of this year. But as I'm saying, if Tbilisi would be invited to contribute with its own portion, or with its own traction of a goodwill, we are more than ready to do that.
We do have several international platforms at the moment, Brussels, Moscow, Washington, when there is a discussion between two sides is going with a mediation. But you rightly mentioned that history is something that unites three South Caucasus countries. So maybe really the Georgia and Tbilisi itself may serve as a good platform to unite not only the officials in their statements and claims to think about the future development of and coexistence, but the peoples. The role of civil society, I guess, which is quite influential. We know about different civil society organizations and non-governmental organizations who had a chance to meet in Georgia and speak about the coexistence between the peoples from three countries.
And not just in Georgia. I myself witnessed that interaction in various other places of the world. And I'm very much pleased to report to you, and I'm not inventing a bicycle, and telling to our audience that the civil society, or the members of the civil society, including Georgia, but most importantly from Azerbaijan and Armenia, are talking to each other, trying to find a common language in a good faith. And that definitely, gives a good example to stakeholders and to the decision makers. So in relation to the eternal question whether the bottle is half full or half empty, we have to say that the bottle is half full, and the prospect of the sort of solidarity in the South Caucasus, I was prompted to say the common market or some kind of union, but let's hold on, with those connotations. I think that prospects are not weak and becoming stronger and stronger. And as I've said, by the end of this year, I think we will have more to say in that respect, hopefully.
Right. I would also like to speak about TransCaspian international transport route, which is being called also as a middle corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Just recently, the Prime Minister of Kazakhstan paid an official visit to Azerbaijan and Georgia. And one of the key elements for discussion was definitely the future of the middle corridor, the transport communication. What is the position and expectation of Georgia from this particular project, and how the future development of the situation in the South Caucasus may benefit, or vice versa?
It will benefit tremendously. At the start of our conversation, we mentioned several keywords: interconnectedness. If we don't like interdependency, let's stick to interconnectedness. And in that context, when we were speaking about Georgian and Azerbaijani relations, we had on mind a few grand projects like Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan and Baku-Erzurum, Baku-Kars these days. But if we take the middle corridor, this is multiplying the scale of those projects many, many times, especially in this time, in these days of those variety of crises. Of course, with the bigger scale of the middle corridor, the challenge is even bigger. We're not talking anymore just about Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. We're talking about at least 5 nations who are directly involved into implementing that project. And when I'm saying directly involved, that means not just logistical challenges, but some legalese of unifying the standards, bringing them in conformity, so forth and so on. And we have a number of indirect participants. And the key indirect participant and beneficiary is Europe. And by the way, since I'm here in Baku, I wish to go to the very important statement which President Aliyev has made recently when we were having some event in Shusha in May this year. he was speaking about Azerbaijan as a reliable security partner, a reliable energy security partner for Europe. And I think this is a very critical statement when we speak about the purpose of any particular nation. But what makes, that statement even more unique, we are also saying, and quite rightfully, that strong Azerbaijan is unthinkable without reliable partnership by Georgia, and the development and sustainability of Georgia is out of the question without that support by Azerbaijan. So I think that, again, by multiplying that bilateral access and building on that access the bigger scale, which is the middle corridor, would really bring even bigger benefits to Azerbaijani economy and to Georgian economy. And on top of the economical effect that would also provide, with that much needed resilience domestically, which is, as we say these days, in the reality of populism, radicalism, and extremism, it is so much important to keep, that cohesiveness and coherent civic structure. And I think, with the economic benefits, we would be more able to provide with that sustainability our respective societies as well.
You already practically answered partially my next question about energy cooperation between Georgia and Azerbaijan, the importance of the salt and gas corridor, which is a very, very important project for many European countries.
Yeah.
And we see that the number of European states who are willing to have good developing energy partnership with Azerbaijan is growing. And Georgia, as a part of this project, what are the expectations of Georgia from these particular projects, and how exactly Georgia may decide to integrate into the new project, like, for example, green energy development? Just recently, there was a partnership signed between Hungary, Romania, Georgia, and Azerbaijan, who agreed to Black Sea electricity project, which will deliver the future of the green energy, particularly to the European states. So how here Georgia may contribute to the future development?
I'm very grateful to you for that question, because it's not just the middle corridor, it's the Black Sea electricity cable. Those are two projects in the pipeline which have to revolutionize the region. And we very much hope that those hopes and those inspirations would come true. In terms of Georgia, why it is important, the Black Sea electricity cable in particular, we could mention a number of reasons, but let me group all those reasons into two. Georgia has always been positioning itself as a transit country. That role remains as it is, and that role would even increase with the Black Sea electricity cable. But on top of that, Georgia would get a unique opportunity to export its own energy, by the energy which it would be producing through the infrastructure which would be constructed within the framework of the Black Sea electricity. So instead of just one single purpose, we would be getting two major purposes or two major objectives under the same project: the transit and exporting its own energy. And one more, if I may, when we speak about the possible contributing by Georgia to sustainability of the middle corridor, the Georgian government has relatively recently announced an Aklia deep water maritime project, which would plug into the middle corridor and would make it more competitive, more bankable, and more commercially sensible. So I think that when we speak about the contribution, on top of political stability, on top of some financial contributions, in terms of logistics, in terms of infrastructure, Anaklia could and would become a very natural and organic extension of the middle corridor.
And my final question, maybe to better understand the foreign policy priorities of Georgia. Azerbaijan is not a member of the European Union, we're not a member of NATO, and we are trying to have this balanced policy. The last month shows that Georgia is willing to participate in the regional projects, energy, transport, communication, as I already mentioned. Do you think that Georgia is still willing to be part of Europe, NATO, and at the same time to have more balanced relations with Central Asian states to be part of the project? Do you think that there is a changes in the foreign policy priority of Georgia?
I won't be. I cannot speak on behalf of Georgia, but I could share with you my personal comments. As we frequently say in Georgia, our choice when we speak about Europe and when we speak about Euro-Atlantic integration, we call it our civilizational choice. And it's not when we speak about the civilization, it means it's not the choice of this generation. It's the choice of many generations in the past. So that this is one point. The second point, as you may well know, that we have for some people very odd and very bizarre constitutional principle or constitutional proviso, which says that Georgia's agencies and authorities should apply all the efforts to achieve that objective of integrating country with Euro-Atlantic community. So this is sort of ticking the box of the legalese. But in terms of the practicalities, my personal view has always been that Georgia should be open in all possible directions, without denying, without undermining, without diluting to any slightest traction that civilizational choice. We should be open to the potentials of the Asian markets, Central Asia in particular, and we should be looking for any slightest opportunities to exploit those benefits. And I think, even in that context, the cooperation between Azerbaijan and Georgia matters. Although we have different geopolitical frequencies, but I think that your unique position, your unique posture in your type of world, and our unique position could really complement each other very organically and make that partnership even more interesting and interactive for regional powers and for external powers.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining our program today.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just to remind you, watch CBC Weekly Talk. My name is Anastasia Laurina. Stay with us and see you in the next edition.